Greetings and welcome to the third and final part of my top 30 games of 2019. In this episode, I'll be counting down the top 10, and if you're interested in seeing the rest of the list, if you haven't already, check out my other two videos. A couple of notes before we start. Firstly, this is my list and my list alone. Opinions are subjective, and we can't like everything. If you disagree or agree with anything, I'd love to hear from you in the comments or on Twitter. Secondly, I haven't played everything that came out this year. No one has. This list is as complete as I can make it from games I have played, all of which I've made impressions videos about in the last year. If a game you love isn't here, there's a fair chance I just didn't get around to playing it. So with that out of the way, let's dive right into the list.
Number 10.
The original Super Mario Maker was an amazing game trapped on a system very few people bought, which wouldn't have been a major problem for the quality of the game itself, except by its very premise. Mario Maker lived or died by the quality of levels created by its community of level designers. With the release of Super Mario Maker 2, Nintendo attacked this problem twofold. By releasing the game with a light campaign mode, they ensured that, no matter what, the game would have 50 plus excellently designed levels packed in, and by releasing a sequel on Nintendo Switch, they could take advantage of its rapidly expanding install base. And so, the launch of Super Mario Maker 2 fulfills the promise of its predecessor thanks to its expanded reach. That's not to say there weren't some truly spectacular levels before, but they were buried under a lot of not-so-great ones. When the sequel launched, I hoovered up level codes from everyone I followed on Twitter who were trying their hand at designing them, as well as being given level codes by people who jumped into my Twitch chat, including one open-world exploration level called Fleet Above the Sky that is still, to this day, one of my favourite Mario Maker levels ever. Between the brilliant levels that Nintendo designers themselves have made, the excellent levels that the community have made, and the updates, including the recently released Legend of Zelda update that adds Link as a potential playable character and completely upends the core gameplay, Super Mario Maker 2 is a game I can't help but return to see what wonderful creations await me, and it's easily one of my favourite and most played games of 2019.
Number 9.
Gallivanting across the stars with a robot companion is always a good place to start any adventure, as will come up again in a few minutes. But when I read the premise for Heaven's Vault, while I was looking for some games to cover during the summer drought, that this was a game where you played an archaeologist who set out to explore the history of an ancient dead civilization to unlock the mysteries of their culture, I knew this was something I had to give the time of day. And wow, am I glad I did, because this is a very different kind of game. It's also an awesome one. As a layer, you need to dig into the relics and artifacts left behind by a precursor culture in an attempt to try and solve a greater mystery. You do this with one brilliant mechanic: translating their language. All throughout your travels, you'll find writing belonging to this dead civilization, and you need to figure out what it says. It's ostensibly a puzzle game, but what makes Heaven's Vault so compelling is that you're not simply bashing a puzzle until the game tells you that you got the answer right. Instead, the game steps back and lets you figure out things for yourself, using only your past findings and environmental context as a guide. You'll make mistakes, and those mistakes can shape where the story goes, but you'll also be able to fix those mistakes later, by applying new knowledge to old findings. All of this works thanks to Inkle creating a rich, deep lore that's fascinating to slowly uncover as you work your way from location to location, and as I peeled away each new layer of the larger puzzle, it became more and more difficult to put the game down. I loved every minute of Heaven's Vault. It's a very different sort of puzzle game, but that's what makes it special, and one of my favourite games of 2019.
Number 8.
The sounds of hundreds of swarming rats blocking my path and devouring those unfortunate enough to be caught in the darkness as I desperately tried to escort Amicia and her little brother to safety away from the men trying to kill them, still haunt me. Many months after having played A Plague Tale: Innocence. Innocence is a hell of an apt subtitle for this harrowing tale, focusing on the loss of innocence for Amicia, and most of the characters she meets as her idyllic life is shattered when the Inquisition slaughter almost everyone she cares about and forces her to flee across a war-torn country. While there are other characters that you'll meet on your journey, A Plague Tale quite rightly focuses on the evolving relationship between Amicia and her estranged brother Hugo. Their mother kept Hugo locked away for most of his life before the Inquisition came, and the siblings only really start getting to know each other on their perilous quest. It's heartbreaking, grim, fraught, and very occasionally beautiful, and watching their relationship change and evolve as the game continues is enthralling, thanks to excellent writing and voice acting, both of which quickly had me emotionally invested in their story. A Plague Tale's pacing is helped by the way it keeps switching gears as you go on. There are quite a few different gameplay elements that make up its DNA. Sometimes you'll simply be walking through an environment as characters chat, other times you'll be pursued by rats or enemy soldiers, or you'll be solving puzzles, or trying your hand at stealth. And the game knows exactly when to change things up. Whenever you feel like one section is about to overstay its welcome, it's done, and you move on to the next, which constantly keeps you hooked to keep playing. I'm not sure I'll ever shake how skin-crawling an encounter with those rats were, though.
Number 7.
Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a simultaneously surprising game and a familiar one. Its familiarity comes from how recognisable its influences are, and how unmistakably Star Wars it is, thanks to excellent world building and audio design. Outside of being satisfyingly faithful to its source material, it successfully mashes together several different genres into a cohesive whole. There are the Metroidvania elements, which unlock new areas of visited locations with new force powers, and there are the tombs that are reminiscent of Legend of Zelda temples, equally as focused on environmental puzzle solving as swinging a lightsaber at stormtroopers. Fallen Order's most notable influence, however, is also its most surprising: the Soulsborne games. While this isn't a game that is as punishing or challenging as a Dark Souls or Sekiro, it does borrow gameplay elements from them, integrating them smartly into its own mechanics, whether by the way its lightsaber combat works, or how you need to rest at meditation points to spend XP and replenish your healing items at the expense of respawning every enemy in the level. Fallen Order's Soulsborne influences are intelligently used to create a greatly satisfying Star Wars adventure. Perhaps most surprising is what Fallen Order is actually about. Respawn fights the urge to make this a simple power fantasy of good versus evil. Instead, the crew of the Mantis is made up of people struggling with the trauma and survivor's guilt that comes with living through the Jedi Purge and the rise of the Empire. They've gone through a lot, and they need to work together through their traumas as well as go on an adventure across the galaxy. The narrative is excellently well written, creating a compelling story with flawed characters going through an understandably tough time, where it might have been easy to give in to the temptation to take an easier path.
Number 6.
Sunless Skies does what every great sequel before it has done: improved on its predecessor in almost every way, and given that Sunless Sea was already an excellent game to begin with, this is no small task. The writing in Sunless Skies is absolutely top-notch. The main story, at least the one I chose, pursuing the truth of the universe because who needs wealth and fame, is enthralling. But so too are all of the side stories, crew quests, random vignettes, and just about every word committed to this wonderfully and densely packed game. Just about every time I made landing at a port, usually just to resupply or drop off a passenger, I'd end up spending a huge chunk of time there, sometimes hours, digging through every story thread, big and small, that I could find. I was also incredibly appreciative of the sequel's new Merciful mod, which lets you blunt the roguelite elements somewhat, by allowing you to load a save when you die instead of starting over with a new captain, which made me feel like I could actually make some progress through its wonderful stories without fear of having to begin anew if I met an untimely end. And there are plenty of ways to meet your untimely end. Some are mundane. Running out of fuel will all but strand you out in space, running out of food will eventually see you and your crew starve, and being blown up by mad pirates is always a possibility. But in amongst the beauty, there are some horrors lurking in Victorian space. Sunless Skies creates a world with a rich lore and tremendous atmosphere, thanks in part to this excellent writing, but also thanks to the world itself. To paraphrase a quote by Q from Star Trek, there are wonders in Sunless Sky more incredible than you can possibly imagine, and terrors to freeze your soul.
Number 5.
Apex Legends was a game nobody could miss when it first came out, landing with a tremendous splash when it was surprise launched by EA in February. The game gathered a stunning 50 million players in less than a month following its release. Heck, even Keith, someone who's notoriously not interested in battle royales, downloaded the game and joined us on a hunt to be the last team standing. And while I imagine its player count is a little less than that now, it's easy to see why Respawn Entertainment's first foray into the battle royale genre hit so well when it was first made available. It pioneered some brand new mechanics for the fledgling genre, particularly with the ping system, a mechanic that let you drop context-sensitive markers for your teammates that could highlight weapons and equipment, mark a path one of enemy locations, and much more. The ping system felt revolutionary, not just for a battle royale, but for all online competitive first-person shooters, allowing players who were unable or unwilling to talk to strangers to still be useful in any given situation. There's a reason Fortnite copied the system almost immediately. Apex Legends' use of hero characters was also incredibly smart, giving fans characters with huge personalities and distinct playstyles to latch onto. When this was mixed with Respawn's trademark fast-paced gameplay and exceptionally satisfying shooting, Apex Legends was always going to prove to be a big hit. While the game has struggled as 2019 has gone on with subpar battle passes and community management controversies, it's still a game I revisit frequently, and it's easily one of my favourite battle royale games so far.
Number 4.
A game I replayed and finished 8 times was always going to end up placing highly on my Game of the Year list, as was a remake of one of my favourite games of all time. But it's not just nostalgia and a really creative set of achievements, which challenged me to complete the game in some imaginative ways, like never using an item box or a healing item, that have propelled it almost to the very top of my favourite games of 2019. In fact, you could take away the achievements and I'd probably still have replayed this game a bunch. Resident Evil 2 is a stunningly brilliant game. Its gameplay is impeccable. It ditches the tank controls of the original and instead focuses on some incredibly slick third-person action that feels incredible to play. What makes Resident Evil 2 such a masterpiece, though, is how it manages to take its terror-inducing horror to brand new heights for the franchise. This is outright the scariest Resident Evil game ever made, and I say that as someone who played RE7 in virtual reality. Everything is more dangerous here than it's ever been. Zombies pose a serious health risk. Lickers are outright terrifying to try and either fight or sneak past. Dogs are agile and deadly. Even the bloody plants are unsettling. Every step during my first playthrough of the game was fraught with anxiety, and nowhere did I feel this more keenly than when I was being hunted by Resident Evil 2's breakout star, Mr. X, an occasional B-scenario boss encounter promoted in the remake to an unrelenting, unkillable stalker who will hunt you mercilessly through certain sections of the game like the goddamn Terminator. RE2 was a total success in almost every way, one that's reinvigorated the Resident Evil franchise, and my excitement for future installments can barely be contained.
Number 3.
I don't think I've ever quite played a game like Disco Elysium. I mean, I've played plenty of CRPGs in my time, but none of them have been anything like this wonderful piece of gaming brilliance. It's difficult to believe that this is Zhang's first game. It's been developed with such confidence and conviction in its own ideas. I'd have assumed it was made by an indie studio with decades of experience if I didn't know any better, calling it a game by a developer at the height of their creativity. It's a game where my first run ended in death within about 90 seconds because my low health detective was killed trying to retrieve a necktie from a spinning ceiling fan. Or where I failed a skill check and was treated to a scene where my gloriously over-the-top attempted escape was followed by a person in a wheelchair I didn't see. I bring these examples up often because they're indicators of the tone and wit of one of the best written games of 2019, and maybe the entire generation. Seriously, Disco Elysium is densely packed with huge walls of text, and I read every single word. It's a game where you'll have frequent conversations with voices in your head, living embodiments of your various skills, and where failing skill checks can be just as rewarding as passing them. Or where you'll desperately try to retrieve the clothes and equipment you recklessly discarded during a 3-day bender, and where the hangover from said bender is so severe it gives your character amnesia and a plausible reason why you know nothing about the world you're exploring, leveling the playing field between player knowledge and character knowledge brilliantly. In short, Disco Elysium is one of the most genius, well-written, hilarious games I've played in years, and easily one of the best of 2019.
Number 2.
Let's be realistic here for a second. Control could claim a place in this list on the strength of the Ashtray Maze alone. A masterclass in level design and the integration of music into a set piece, I've had more breathless conversations about how spectacular this single 10-minute section of the game is than I can remember. Control could also claim a spot in the top 10 of this list thanks entirely to the way it builds such a fascinatingly weird world. A world in which its most memorable moments revolve around encounters with objects as mundane as clocks or a fridge. The environmental and background storytelling do some serious heavy lifting, and there are some truly amazing sights to behold as you explore the enigmatic and strange oldest house. Remedy fleshes out the lore of this place and the supernatural objects and places it contains with its signature expertise. It's one of the only games I've played in ages where I've actually stopped to take the time to read the notes I'm finding, because they're incredibly well written and offer a fascinating insight into the larger world. Also, whoever came up with and executed the Threshold Kids deserves a pay rise, a promotion, and a damn medal. But what pushes Control so high up this list is the package these two things are wrapped up in. An incredibly satisfying action game that is, thanks to its environmental destruction, a technical marvel. The run and gun play is fine enough, but once you throw Jesse's supernatural powers into the mix, Control becomes a game that is incredibly enjoyable to play. Using telekinetic powers to hurl scenery or rip chunks out of the floor is always satisfying, in the same way as flinging Kratos' axe in last year's God of War. Add to all of this the jaw-droppingly explosive way the environment reacts to combat, and Control is easily one of the best games that came out in 2019.
Number 1.
If you ask me what I was doing over the summer, I can actually tell you. I was playing the latest Fire Emblem game. After it launched, I spent every free moment I had loading it up, sinking close to 70 hours into the game as I guided my golden deer classmates through its various twists and turns. Truth be told, the main narrative wasn't all that great, and I'm struggling to recall the major plot points in any great detail. Not that I'd spoil them anyway, but the fact that the story was a bit meh, and the game still gets to number 1 on this list, is a big deal. That's because, while the narrative was kinda weak overall, the character work was, quite frankly, amazing. Long after my memories of any part of the overarching narrative have faded from my memory completely, I'll still be able to recall each and every one of my students' stories with total clarity. The budding and adorable relationship between Raphael and Bernadetta, fostering Ignis's talent for art, helping Marianne with a dark family secret, trying desperately to get Sylvain to stop being a borderline sexual predator. These are all examples I can recall without looking them up, and I can remember so many more, but I don't want to list them all. We'd be here for hours. It's a game that got me to end up liking Lawrence, for crying out loud. The main storyline was, at best, serviceable, with some epic cutscenes and a few genuinely excellent moments punctuating a story that mostly just kind of existed to keep the game moving forward. The strategy was equally serviceable. It was fun to experiment with different party combinations, but some of my teammates were so overpowered by the midpoint that it really didn't matter too much who did what. Unless you had permadeath turned on, which sounds like a special level of hellish anxiety I can live without, thank you very much. Even battles, after a while, was simply a chance to enhance support levels between other characters. But Fire Emblem hooked me by making me care for each and every one of its characters so much, I had to know how their stories would end. I played the game every chance I got, regularly staying up way later than was healthy, just so I could unlock a new support scene or play through a side quest that would give me a little more insight into one of the classmates, or professors, at Garrigmock Monastery. Of all the games I played in 2019, Fire Emblem was the one that got its hooks in the deepest. It grabbed me and refused to let me go until I finished it and got to see each character's epilogue screen. It was also the only game that gave me that strangely sad feeling that the journey was over as the credits rolled. In short, it was easily my favourite game of 2019. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave us a comment, like, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got tons of awesome videos coming every week, including review impressions, indie game of the week, debate-driven top 5 lists, video essays, and our weekly podcast where we discuss games, gaming culture, and the games industry. We also stream 3 times a week at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. But most importantly, have a fantastic day.